There's not many Canadian Christians who are not familiar with Ravi Zacharias. In fact, from time to time, we have featured interviews with Ravi right here on 100 Huntley Street. But this is the first time that I think you, let alone I, are meeting LT Jeyachandran, who oversees the Singapore operations for Ravi Zacharias International Ministries. He is a noted apologist and speaker. He's in the area putting on a couple of seminars. And we're just really honored to have him here for a few minutes. Thanks for coming our way. LT. LT stands for?
Lawrence Theodore.
Lawrence Theodore. Yeah. Very distinguished name. You're from Singapore now, but you originally are from India, southern India?
Yes.
Chennai area?
Yes.
I was in Chennai, and I can say I survived the traffic.
Yeah. We walk and drive by faith and not by sight.
Absolutely, absolutely. But there's so much to talk about. Let's just get right into it. Our world right now is in turmoil.
Yes.
We've got the ongoing volcano with the threat of a larger volcano in Iceland. We've got oil pouring into the Gulf of Mexico. With such fury and such environmental impact, it almost makes one think of one of the bulls of wrath in the book of Revelation. We have North and South Korea threatening one another. We have Iran becoming nuclear. We have major conflict emerging again in the Middle East vis-a-vis Israel. It's a very troubled world. And in the midst of all of this, there is this threat of an emerging, not culture war, not nation-to-nation war, but religious war between radical Islam and the West. What is your perspective on the world as you see it right now? Where would your main concern be?
That's a big question you asked me, Jim. Probably I would look at it this way. I look at every counterfeit. One of the things that I've been teaching myself as I've done this apologetics over these last many years is to look for the original wherever there is a counterfeit. So when you look at these wars, I want to look at the original, which is the God of the Bible himself, a relational being, as Trinity. And you find that every time you depart from that original, you find that other religions emerge. For example, you can take Islam, which affirms the oneness of God, but looks at the oneness as an absolute oneness. There is not a relational oneness. And so you find that the philosophy that it gives birth to cannot truly bring about relationships. Whereas you take Hinduism, and in fact, I consider myself greatly privileged as an Indian to grow up as a Christian between the two great religions of Hinduism and Islam, because they give you the two opposite sides of the Trinitarian understanding of God. In polytheism, you have gods who are not in relationship, whereas in the Bible, you have the Father and the Son united in love through the Spirit. So I would say that from a theological perspective, I would try and diagnose the problem that you have outlined as basically one of either removing relationships and making it a totalitarian oneness. It's a kind of a fascism, or a kind of a relationality where there is no transcendence. It's all relationship between finite powers. And I think what brings that calmness and that security is to know that there is this wonderful God in whom the distinction and the unity, the relationship between the Father and the Son through the Spirit. I'm now looking at every aspect of life today as a violation ultimately of relationships. You take environment, it's basically a broken down relationship. So that's basically
well, yeah, even a relationship between us and our environment, and a relationship between profit and long-term sustainability.
Right.
BP, of course, is the great boogeyman right now with the Gulf oil spill, and they're being seen as cutting corners, to make profit. And look what's happened. Yeah. It could even boil down to 2 or 3 people making decisions that are having an impact that may impact America and the world economy for months, if not years to come. Relationships. Now, let's step back a bit. There's a lot of our viewers are not very exposed to comparative religions.
Right.
And they hear people in the press, wondering at the conflict between radical Islam, for instance, in the West, between the Muslim faith, the Christian faith, the Jewish faith, Hindus. In Pakistan, you've got Muslim versus Hindu, Hindu versus Muslim in terms of its, this escalating tension between Pakistan and India. People say, what's all the problem here? We're all just climbing the same mountain. We're taking different paths. Is that an accurate or an inaccurate statement?
No, that's a very interesting statement. This particular story actually comes from India, that we are all climbing the same mountain, all roads lead to the top. And the 6 blind men who touched the elephant, it's all a matter of perspective.
Tell us that story.
Yeah. In fact, there's a fatal flaw in that story, Jim. When someone tells me that story, when I talk about the uniqueness of Christ, I would normally ask them, these 6 men are blind. If they had had a committee meeting after touching the different parts of the elephant, would they have come out with the idea of a whole elephant? The answer is no. Who knows that there is a whole elephant out there? Only one who has sight.
Yeah, now, one blind man said, touching the tail, an elephant's like a rope. Another guy touching the trunks as an elephant's like a snake. Or whatever, and then one guy touching the side, he's like a wall. Another guy touching the leg, he's like a tree.
And touching the ears, like the sieve, the olden days.
And so they all have this perspective of what an elephant is. So you're saying they get together as a committee and they can't agree on anything.
Yeah, they cannot truly put together an elephant. In fact, I am now drawing the conclusion that the only one who knows that there is an elephant out there is one who has sight, and everyone is blind, including the guy who tells you this story. So I draw the conclusion that we need revelation.
Right.
Yeah. It's not a question of perspective, it's a question of revelation. Now, all religions do claim revelation. You'll have to see which of those revelations have the better explanatory power. In my view, which is really why I start with the Trinity, when I talk one-on-one with Muslim friends, I actually start with the Trinity. I say that essentially when we say God so loved the world, this God must be capable of love even within his own being. He cannot learn love by creating the world and then loving it. And therefore, even for the Christian in your audience, I would say John 17:24 is a greater verse than John 3:16. John 17:24, the Father loves the Son before the creation of the world. So John 3:16 is the spillover, is the overflow of John 17:24. So you take people back to one of relationships ultimately. So even the legitimate peacemaking that we try and do all over the world, unless it is based on an understanding of God, who in his own being is a relational God, I do not think we are going to get very far.
What was it, this relational dynamic, do you think, that impacted Mahatma Gandhi so much as he looked at the Christian faith and the Jewish as well as the Christian scriptures, really wanting to emulate Christ? I mean, do you think that relational element appealed to him as a Hindu, or was there something else there?
I would think that 2 things about Mahatma Gandhi I would think of. One is that he grew up in South Africa, which was essentially a professing Christian nation, which is why he saw the contradiction, the hypocrisy, when he saw the white supremacists and so on. The second thing I believe that Gandhi read into the New Testament is more of a Hindu asceticism. He would take something like Jesus' terms of discipleship in Luke chapter 14. If anyone who comes after me and does not hate his father, mother, wife, children cannot be my disciple. So he sort of read that into it. But I would surely say, I mean, this is not an indictment on Gandhi's understanding of Christianity. What I would say to my fellow Christians in India and elsewhere is that a gentleman who did not eventually choose to follow Christ could learn more from the Christian faith than many of us who profess to be followers of Christ. I think so. It's more a challenge to us to begin to see more of what the Christian faith looks at. So I think Gandhiji surely understood some of these aspects, but I do not think he quite saw it in a relational sense. Of course, he wanted to bring peace between the Muslims and the Hindus. On the eve of the Independence Day, he was fasting when India was celebrating. So that was very sad.
Let's talk about Revelation here for a minute.
Yeah.
speaks to me of the existential, the experiential, the subjective element of faith. Is it possible to be a true believer without having had some sense of personal revelation from God to your own spirit, some calling from God to communion with Him?